it actually costs you time not to sleep more because we're just not as effective. We can spend hours and hours on something that would take us a fraction of the time if we had gotten more sleep or better quality sleep. So this is something to consider if you're one of those people that's like, well, I just don't have time to sleep more, is how much more effective and productive you would be if you were sleeping longer and sleeping better quality.
Welcome to The Way of the Muse, a podcast for women who want to create richness in every area of their lives, from business and career to lifestyle, relationships, family, purpose, and fulfillment. I'm Gigi Sage.
And I'm Makena Sage. We're a mother-daughter coaching team, and combined, we've spent over 4 decades helping people create their best and most fully expressed lives. If you're ready to step into your bigger dreams with ease, fun, and flow, you're in the right place. Let's get into the episode.
Hello, everyone. This is Makena Sage bringing you a solo podcast episode this week. And today we're going to talk about dialing in your sleep. This is one of my favorite topics personally. Sleep is something that is very, very important to me and hopefully important to you too. And if it hasn't been at the top of your priority list, then maybe after listening today, you will reconsider that. And we're going to talk a little bit about why sleep is important. And the most importantly, what can you do to get more sleep, get better quality sleep, and really see the benefits of that in your life. So that is our topic for today. And first of all, I do want to have a brief kind of disclaimer that this is not medical advice. I'm going to be sharing my own experiences in the podcast today and what's helped me personally. As always, please talk to your doctor about what's right for you and just use your own judgment. So these are just my own experiences. So to me, sleep really isn't a luxury. It is foundational. It is so, so key. It's probably one of the number one, if I had to say, life hacks. I'm not big on hacks, but if I had to say one of the things that you can shift or tweak or improve that will make the biggest difference across your entire life and your success, that would be sleep. Because when you get good sleep, everything in your life works better. Everything in your brain works better, in your body. It's really, really core to everything. And so we're going to go into why and how in just a moment. But I do want to say, as always, if you find this episode helpful, please share it with someone in your life. Is there someone you know that could benefit from this or struggles with their sleep or said they want to get more sleep? Then we would be so honored if you would share this episode with them. So going into why is sleep important? I've always loved sleep, as mentioned. When I was a kid, I would sleep very deeply. I was one of those really great sleepers. And in fact, it was hard to wake me up a lot of the time, which I think was frustrating for my parents. And just 10, 12 hours a night a lot of the time. I don't know about when I was a baby, but once I was a child and getting into adolescence, and I loved sleep. It was like pleasurable, enjoyable, restorative, something that I really just naturally slept well and prioritized. And no, that's not true for everyone, but I was really blessed in that regard. And then as I got older, sleep quality started to decline a little bit, probably into my teens a little bit as I started staying up later at night and using more screens. And then definitely once I got into college and university, I was just a huge overachiever. And I was involved in not only a full course load at any given time, but involved in a lot of different activities and in groups on campus. I worked multiple part-time jobs most of the time. I was an honors student. So, on and on and on. There were a lot of obligations on my time. And so with that, where could I sacrifice but in my sleep? And so I started sleeping fewer and fewer hours. And I know my average week would be maybe 4 to 6 hours of sleep, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then I would get to usually Thursday or Friday, and I would have a huge emotional breakdown because I just was not functioning very well anymore, right? I was burning the candle at both ends and just exhausted. And so this would start to hit me, the exhaustion, and then the emotional component that came with that by the latter part of the week. And I just remember I would kind of fall apart. And then on the weekend, I would try to catch up on sleep, which research says isn't really possible. But I would get deeper sleep, let's say, or I'd get more sleep on the weekends, even though I went and partied, which my quality of sleep probably wasn't that great because I was drinking alcohol a lot of the time. But I would crash out for, let's say, 10 hours a night on the weekend and then start all again on Monday. So I went to the extremes with sleep, certainly with the way I slept when I was young, and then the way I navigated sleep when I was in university. And I think really as a result of a lot of that, I dealt with a lot of health issues in those years after college. Probably those next 5 to 10 years, even though I didn't know it for a while, what was going on, I had a lot of adrenal fatigue and hormone imbalance because the way it works, there's a lot of science to this, and I'm not going to go deep into it, but is if we're continuously sort of burning cortisol and adrenaline, is that cortisol we need it in order to live. And so if we are using a lot of it by not sleeping a lot and by kind of running on this go energy, then it actually starts to pull from other hormones in our body and transform those hormones into cortisol to make sure that we can survive. So it's a survival mechanism. It's a very intelligent thing that our bodies do, but it leads to a lot of hormonal imbalance, or at least that was my experience. So that over the years, I had all kinds of challenges with that. One thing was just being stuck in the state of fight or flight, which took a long time to sort of wind myself out of. I had a lot of mood swings. I started having digestive issues, a lot of different stuff that popped up in those years after college. Even though my sleep started to get better than it was then, I still was kind of like the damage was done. And there were other factors, of course, but I do think this was a big one. So I do want to say, I know life is full. You might have small children. I'm about to have a baby of my own, or maybe by the time this episode is airing, I may even have her here already. And so, if that's the case, your sleep is going to be impacted. You may have a very demanding job, but there are ways that we can still prioritize sleep. And that's a lot of what I want to talk about. There's ways to optimize and prioritize sleep. And so why not do as much as you can to, even if your sleep is going to be interrupted or reduced, to improve the quality of your sleep? Well, I'll tell you some of the reasons why you might want to take this seriously. And these are just a few of the research-backed benefits of sleep. And there are so many. You can just Google and you'll find a huge list, or ask ChatGPT or whatever AI software you like. But some of the things that the research shows is that one night of poor sleep can reduce your mental sharpness by 30%. 30%. That's a huge reduction, right? That's 1/3 almost of your mental sharpness and capacity cut away just by having a night of poor sleep. So, not to mention emotional, we're not even talking about the emotional side of things, but this is just like your ability to cognitively function, to think clearly, to, work effectively. This is one thing that when people talk about, well, I don't have time to sleep more. And in my opinion, it actually costs you time. And this is not just my opinion, it's actually what the research shows. It actually costs you time not to sleep more because we're just not as effective. We can spend hours and hours on something that would take us a fraction of the time if we had gotten more sleep or better quality sleep. So this is something to consider if you're one of those people that's like, well, I just don't have time to sleep more, is how much more effective and productive you would be if you were sleeping longer and sleeping better quality. All right, another statistic is that chronic sleep is linked to higher risk of certain cancers, especially breast and colon cancer. Now, this is just the research we know. It's probably linked to a whole lot more, not just cancers, but other diseases. So that's another consideration, is just in terms of your health. Getting great sleep is one of the best things you can do. Good sleep helps clear toxins in the brain that are actually linked to Alzheimer's disease. So if that's a concern in your family or just something you've ever worried about, then getting good sleep is one of the biggest things you can do to prevent or reduce your chances of Alzheimer's disease. Good sleep regulates blood sugar. This is one for people who struggle with weight, or if you have any kind of diabetes or pre-diabetes or anything like that. One of the biggest things is, can you dial in your sleep? If you dial in your sleep, you get enough sleep, your blood sugar is so much more stable. And you might just know this from the way you feel. Like, I know if I get less sleep, I feel more hungry throughout the day. I eat more. Feels like my blood sugar is going up and down more. I just don't feel as regulated. And so it can lower risk of weight gain and also lower your risk of type 2 diabetes. Getting good sleep is one of the best natural mood boosters that there are. It actually has been shown to reduce anxiety and depression. And finally, it's essential for memory, learning, and clear thinking. And you guys, this is just the very high level. Again, I just wanted to give you a broad picture of some of the benefits of getting great sleep. But truly, there's so many more. And we're only sort of scratching the surface with the research on the impact of great sleep. I did want to give one real life example. I heard on a recent podcast. So LeBron James, who is an incredible basketball player, and he's also a billionaire, if you didn't know that, he really prioritizes sleep, at least 8 hours a night. And I believe if he's playing basketball, like when he is or was, I don't even know if he's still actively playing, but he would sleep a lot more, like 10 or more hours a night. And he said it's the best way he knows to re-energize his body and mind. So he is just one example of someone who's a very high performer, not only in sports, but also in business. And he really credits sleep as one of the most important things that has helped him in his success. So take it from him if you're an athlete or a business person. And, it's one thing to hear the statistics. It's another thing to hear that some of the world's highest performers in a lot of different arenas know the power of really, really good sleep. So let's talk about, I want to call these common sleep stealers. Okay, so what steals people's sleep? These are things that many of us do without realizing that they're making sleep harder, or maybe we sort of know in the back of our minds, but we haven't really fully looked at it or admitted to ourselves that this is something we might want to change. So one that is commonly cited, and you are probably aware of on some level, is using screens or scrolling on social media at night. So we're kind of talking like, especially once the sun goes down, because what happens here is it disrupts our brain chemistry, because throughout history and millennia, we developed as human beings to have the light of the sun, which starts out more bright and blue in the early part of the day, in the middle of the day, and then actually becomes more orange and red as we get closer to sunset. And then we have no light or very little light, maybe candlelight or fires. This was for most of human history, the way our bodies were working. Now with screens, they produce a large amount of blue light. And so blue light, remember, is what is typically more in the morning or the early part of the day. And so what's happening here is it's actually coming into our eyes, and then it disrupts things like melatonin, which is I believe it's a hormone actually, that is essential for good sleep. So we naturally produce melatonin, but when you're getting a lot of blue light in your eyes later into the evening or the night, it's actually stimulating your brain, saying it's earlier than it is, and it makes it very hard to go to sleep. So if you're using screens past sunset, or you're scrolling on your phone late at night, there are some things you can do to help mitigate this. One thing is there are often blue light filters. So I used to use an app for this. Now my computer has a filter. It's not as dark as the app used to be, but it's helpful. And my phone also has it. I use Mac products. So I have a little kind of button I can push that is like a night shift feature. And that makes the light on my computer, let's say, more orange, and it cuts out more of the blue light. Same thing on my phone is if I go to, let's see, if I click for me on like the little, if you're watching this on video, you can see, but the little sun here on the settings, if I hold that down, then I see night shift off until sunset. So you can just Google night shift or ask an AI to help you with this, is making sure that you know how to access the night shift feature on your computer and or your phone. I have mine set automatically on my phone to go on at a certain time and off at a certain time each day. So kind of from sundown to sunrise, the night shift feature is on. It's filtering more of that blue light and helping reduce that impact for me because it's more orange light that's coming through. So that's one thing. That's a kind of a minimum. If you don't use Apple products, or if you want another solution that's even more effective, I think there is software I used to use. I believe it was free, called f.lux. So it was F like Frank .lux, and you would download that to your computer, for example, and then similarly set that up to have, be filtering out the light for you. The other thing you can use that you may have seen some people doing is blue light blocking glasses. Now, one thing I want to share about this is that not all blue light blocking glasses are created equal. And, there's a lot of like glasses companies and things like that will say, oh, do you want to get the blue light blocking feature? And, add that to your glasses or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. They definitely help a little bit. But if your glasses are clear, meaning they don't look orange, there's a good chance they're not blocking that much blue light. So this is just something to be aware of. You might think you're wearing blue light blockers, but find that it's not really reducing the blue light all that much. And so just do a little research if this is something you're looking into on how much blue light does this particular, set of glasses block. Most of the time, to block enough blue light to really make a difference, they would have to be orange tinted. So not the maybe most fashionable, but you can find some really cool ones these days. There's really cool companies out there. You can look on Amazon or you can Google and look for different kinds of blue light blocking glasses. So you would just put those on, especially at night after sunset again, wear them around your house because there's lots of blue light coming in, not just from your screens, but also from lights in your house and from, I guess that's really the other source, right? So any kind of light in your house could also be creating a lot of blue light that's coming into your eyes, not to mention if you watch TV or anything like that in the evenings. Another thing is you may want to set an alarm to just remind you if you do want to reduce your use of screens in the evenings. I set an alarm on my phone that is my wind down alarm, and we'll talk more about that later. Excuse me, but it goes off at 8:30 p.m. every night, and that just tells me, hey, it's getting kind of late into the evening. This is a good time to, be off screens more or to start to wind down, read a book, some of these other things we're going to talk about. And that's a great tip as well, is why not try reading a book in the evenings instead of being on screens. That could be a really big, powerful switch. So screens and scrolling at night is one of the most common sleep stealers. And, you may not believe me that it makes a huge impact, but I promise you it does. And there's a lot of research behind this. And you're just going to have to test it out for yourself for a while. Just give it a shot, really reducing that blue light at night. And ideally reducing your use of screens and scrolling, because there's more to it than just the blue light. I will say that scrolling also activates a lot of areas of the brain, and that can really disrupt your sleep. So there's some really interesting research on this that I shared a podcast episode on another recent episode of this podcast from the Mel Robbins podcast. I believe it's called Before You Waste Time, Listen to This. And it was with a Harvard researcher who specializes in basically understanding the impact of social media on the brain. And he really talked about how, paraphrasing here, but how basically social media and stuff like that kind of numbs us out. And so we're numbing, and then we go off social media, and then there's this natural process that used to happen before we were on screens all the time, where we were sort of processing our thoughts and emotions and things like that from the day in any open windows. So like before we're going to sleep at night, or, while we're making dinner. But now we're so activated all the time, and then we're numbing out with these devices, that we're not getting that time, that sort of open time that we need to process mentally and emotionally, what we went through that day or whatever it might be. And so then what happens is we can't sleep because we stop scrolling, put our phones down, and we try to go to sleep. And not only is the blue light activating us, but also all those thoughts and feelings and emotions that we haven't had time to process are flooding through our system. And we're like, oh my God, I can't wind down. Do you ever get that feeling? And so then what most people do is they pick up their phone and they start scrolling again, or they start working, or whatever it might be. And so we get into this cycle of, I can't sleep, but then we're just filling our time and our brain with using our devices all the time. So we end up in this loop that is hard to get out of. So just know that it's not just about the blue light. It's also about having open times where you're not stimulated, especially as you get into the later part of the evening. Okay, the second sleep stealer is no wind down routine. So if you're going straight from working or even exercising in the evening and trying to go, or putting your kids to sleep or doing a whole bunch of different stuff, and you're kind of wired up, and then you try to go straight to sleep, it's going to be tough to get your body to shift gears. So instead, you want to create some sort of routine, even if it's 10 minutes, that helps you sort of mentally know that it's time to shift and go into rest mode. So for me, I take a bath almost every night. I love Epsom salt baths. I don't always put salts in, but that can be really relaxing with the magnesium. And again, reading at night can be really great. That evening alarm I talked about is usually to really kind of cue me to go, hey, it's time to start thinking about winding down and not just doing a bunch of stuff or on screens. And then I would recommend for most people avoiding late night workouts, because if you work out too late into the evening, it just wakes your body and your brain up. And so for most people, unless it's something like restorative yoga or something like that, then you don't want to be working out super late into the evening. The third sleep stealer that I want to talk about is ignoring your circadian rhythm. So you may have no idea what a circadian rhythm is. And if that's the case, that's an easy one to look up. But it's basically the natural rhythm of our bodies as it aligns to kind of the clock. So not the clock in the modern sense, but more so the sun, right? The sun, the seasons. We have this biological clock in our body that has developed again over millennia to kind of understand what time it is, what, season it is, these kinds of things based on its experience of light coming into our eyes and light hitting our skin from the sun. And what's happened as we've evolved as humans, and especially in this last, let's say 100, 150 years or something like that, is that we're inside a lot more. We're not outside with our eyes getting exposed to the sun and our skin. And by the way, this works even through the clouds to some degree. And so we are out of connection to our natural biological clock, to our internal circadian rhythm. And more research is coming out about this and how challenging that is, how much that is impacting different systems of the body that have sort of relied on that to know how to function optimally. And now we're in this position of we are sort of waking up, staying inside or driving in our car, going, to work, being indoors there, and missing this whole connection to our circadian rhythms. And so this can have an impact on a lot of different things, on our melatonin production, as mentioned, which helps us sleep. Even on digestion, there's a big link between, I've been learning a lot about the link between irritable bowel syndrome or different digestive issues and not having connection to this circadian rhythm. So I'm just going to tell you some of the things you can do that are very simple and actually very quick that can help you to start to realign your circadian rhythms. The biggest thing is getting your eyes in the sun first thing in the morning. So as soon as you wake up, and I have a dog, Chloe. So what I've started to do is, before I would just let her out in the morning and feed her, but now I actually step outside with her. And all I do is I look toward the sun, whether there's clouds or not. I look toward the sun with no sunglasses on, and I just try to get my eyeballs in the sun. It's not too bright usually that time of the morning. And just look at it for a couple minutes. You don't have to look directly at it, but if you look in the direction, right? And so that is really, really important because you're telling your body what time it is. Basically, you're telling it to sort of orient to morning, whatever time of morning it is. And then ideally, you do this a couple more times throughout the day. So again, you don't have to look directly at the sun, but you want to get out and get your eyeballs, not sunglasses, your actual eyes in the sun, and even your skin, which also has a lot of receptors in it, in the sun, or at least being exposed to natural light. And then the other best time other than morning is around sunset, because again, that red light starts to come in. If you look at a sunset or you're outside walking around sunset, then that's going to cue your body, hey, the sun is going down, and that's going to help set that natural circadian rhythm. So morning sunlight exposure in the eyes and on the skin, and evening around sunset. Those are the two most important times, but honestly, the more you can do it throughout the day, the better. And I don't know the research around how long, but I just do a couple of minutes, right? Or maybe more if I'm going for a walk or something, but it doesn't need to be a ton. And this can be really, really helpful for so many things, for your health and your sleep. Now, sunglasses. Let's talk a little bit about those. I love sunglasses. I wear them frequently. But after learning about this, I did start to go, do I need them all the time? Do I need them early in the morning or in the evening if it's sunset and I'm going for a walk? Or can I sort of reduce my use of sunglasses, which are blocking out a lot of that natural light that we want to be hitting our eyes? And so that's what I've done, is in the middle of the day, I still wear them most of the time. But if I'm going for an evening walk with my husband, I put the sunglasses away. Or, if I'm doing that couple minutes in the morning of standing outside, I'm not wearing my sunglasses. So that's a couple of things there. Everything else we've been talking about in terms of reducing blue light at night, wearing blue light blocking glasses, all of that is going to also help your circadian rhythm. It's going to help support natural melatonin production and even digestion. Okay, a couple other pro tips around this. We are very impacted by light as human beings, even if you think you're not. Even if you're one of those people who thinks, whatever, I can sleep in the middle of a bright room in the middle of the day. That may be true, but there are often impacts to the quality of your sleep, that you may or may not be aware of. And so just know that there's a lot of research behind this, that even a tiny light in your room at night can be disruptive, especially anything other than a red light. So if it's more of like a red hued light, it's less likely to disrupt your sleep. If it's green or blue or white or anything else, then there has been research that's shown that it can really impact sleep. Even if you're wearing an eye mask, right? And you're totally like, your eyes are covered. We have receptors again on our skin. We have receptors in different parts of our bodies. And so this is getting much more granular. But if you really want to optimize sleep, then you're going to want to check for hidden lights at night in your room. And so all you would do is turn off all your lights at night like you normally do. And then after your eyes have sort of adjusted to the darkness for a while, maybe you've been laying there with your eyes closed, open them up and do a little scan around your room and notice, oh wait, my clock has a light, or there's this light on the wall that's shining, or there's this little light here off of my, power adapter, or whatever it might be, and see if you can eliminate some of those lights or reduce them. Like I just had to put some blue tape over something on my wall, a little alarm system that had a light over it, blinking off of it at night. And I noticed that when I would wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, that light was sort of hitting my eyes. So if you can reduce hidden lights in your room, that can be really helpful. Wearing an eye mask can also be helpful. So I sleep with an eye mask, even though it's quite dark in my room. And I've also just trained myself to sleep with an eye mask, which is really helpful when I'm traveling or things like that. I've got a really cushy, comfy one. And so I'm used to sleeping with that, and that could just help reduce that exposure to light as well. And then blackout curtains are my other favorite thing. Is just really making sure your room is as dark as possible at night. Helps the body sleep better. All right, a few other tips. I'm just going to go through these ones quickly. And I do want to share that we have a sleep guide with some of my favorite products in it. So if you're like, oh, well, I don't know what kind of eye mask to get, or some of these other things we're going to share here, we have just like a free guide that I created because so many people were asking me for it. So you can get that at wayofthemuse.com/sleep. And that's a little PDF guide, and it has product recommendations and links to everything, and you can check that out as well. All right, other tips. We've talked about light a lot. So the next one is sound. If your partner snores, or there's ambient sound from outside, you live in the city, or whatever it might be, sound can really disrupt our sleep as well. I sleep with earplugs. So my partner does as well, and he likes just like the cheapy ones you can get off Amazon. Those don't really work for my ears. They kind of hurt. So I get a nicer set that I reuse. I use the same pair every night. And the brand that I use is called Loop, and it's their Dream earplugs. So they're just very small and kind of squishy and comfy, and I really like those. So that's in that sleep guide as well. A noise machine. I've slept with a noise machine for many years. We'll see how this goes with a baby. There might be a period where that's not possible, but a lot of people use noise machines for their kids now as well. So you can get a noise machine, or I use an app called Better Sleep that just kind of plays the ambient, like white noise or brown noise or pink noise. It's like non-repeating, staticky sounding noise that just sort of drowns out any other sounds. So these two things are great because, like, when we have guests, for example, in our home, we're like, you don't have to worry about making noise at night unless you're like yelling and screaming. We're not going to hear you because we both sleep with earplugs and a noise machine. Temperature is another big piece. Typically, for most people, being on the cooler side at night or having a warm blanket, but having the room be really cool is going to help you sleep better. We actually have something called like a cooling and heating system for our bed. So it's kind of like a mattress pad with different coils that go through it, and it uses distilled water, and I don't exactly know how it works, but basically Sunny's got a control for his side of the bed. I have a control for my side of the bed, and we can set it to whatever temperature we want. So in the summer, I like to set mine for cool, and so does he. And so that kind of keeps my bedside to whatever temperature. I think I do like 72 most nights. Sunny does even colder than I do. So we can kind of heat or cool the bed to whatever temperature we want. I don't use it as much in the winter because I just find I don't need it. But the other feature that ours has, which is really fun, is you can actually have it wake you up in the morning. Instead of an alarm clock, it can wake you up with heat. So slowly getting hotter and hotter until you wake up, which is kind of a nice way to wake up versus like, jolting awake with an alarm clock. So that's kind of a cool feature as well. We have all those recommendations in the sleep guide as well. Sleep tracking. This can be something that can really help alert you to what's affecting your sleep. If you've ever used like an Oura ring, for example, O-U-R-A, an Oura ring, it tracks your sleep. It actually tracks the quality of your sleep. How much time did you spend in REM sleep versus deep sleep? It's one of the best uses I find for the Oura ring, which tracks a lot of things, but I really like it as a sleep tracker. There's a lot of other ones out there as well. And something that I know from a lot of people who've gotten Oura rings is that it's helped them identify issues with their sleep. So, maybe some people say like, wow, I really notice how much having a glass of wine at night impacts my sleep, and I get much worse sleep scores, or working out late into the evening, or whatever it might be. Some people that I know who have used the Oura ring before have identified like, wow, I'm not getting any REM sleep at night. What is that about? And then they're able to dig deeper, maybe talk to their doctor and figure out what's going on there and actually address that. So tracking your sleep can be really, really powerful to just understand how much sleep are you actually getting, not just like hours you're in bed, but how much sleep are you actually getting and what factors are impacting your sleep. Mouth taping is something else I want to talk about, which sounds crazy to some of you, but there is this trend, so to speak, of taping your mouth shut at night. Now, I'm not talking Scotch tape or, what's called that crazy strong tape. We're talking about strips that are specifically made for your mouth. They're typically quite gentle, and they just gently kind of keep your mouth from opening at night and having you mouth breathe. Now, some of you may not mouth breathe. This may not be an issue. I am typically more of a mouth breather, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But when I discovered mouth taping, it really helped me train myself to breathe more through my nose at night versus my mouth. And there's so many health benefits to this. Not only did it help my teeth, I got way less cavities, way less bacteria building up in my mouth at night. So it was a huge shift in my oral and, oral hygiene, oral health. But also a lot of times when people start mouth taping, they sleep better, they sleep deeper. It might even prevent snoring for some people if that's an issue for you. So you can research this more on your own, but just know that that is something worth looking into. There's a brand of mouth tape. I've tried a lot of them. There's a brand I really like that is also in our sleep guide. And then sublingual melatonin is something I want to talk about. I am not a big fan of using a lot of melatonin. I think people way overuse melatonin, and like anything, you become adjusted to it and you need more and more and more to get the result. And I don't think it's great to be putting a ton of a hormone, into our body. Ideally, we want to be supporting that natural production. So I use it very sparingly, but when I do, the two things I found that really, really work are using a sublingual type. So that just means that it goes right through your mouth, basically into your bloodstream, instead of having to go really swallow it and go through your digestive system. And so you need much, much less if you're using a sublingual type than you do if you're taking a pill that you swallow. So there's a particular brand I like. Also in our sleep guide, I use their 1 milligram chewable tablets. And most people are like, 1 milligram, that's nothing. Well, believe it or not, I use 1/8 to 1/4 of a pill. So not only am I using a tiny amount to start out with in these 1 milligram tablets, I'm actually microdosing the melatonin, and you can do some research on this as well as if you'd like. But there's a lot of benefits to actually microdosing melatonin, and then you're not putting a big amount of it into your system. And my husband does the same thing. He's much, bigger guy than me. And he finds the same thing, that he does not need more than maybe a quarter of a pill to really have that deeper sleep. Because if you are taking higher amounts, there's some research that shows that it actually isn't great for your sleep patterns, that it can actually kind of cycle you in this certain way that is not helpful. Whereas if you microdose, then it's just doing what it's meant to do, which is kind of helping you fall asleep. And it's more of a gentle support. So that's my recommendation. Do your own research, look into it. But I really like both the microdosing aspect. So I just kind of take a tiny little bite off of the edge of one of these 1 milligram tablets. And I don't do it every night. I tend to do it maybe maximum 2 to 4 times a week. So kind of cycling on and off. And again, all of these resources and many more are in the sleep guide. So I'm going to give you that link one more time, which is wayofthemuse.com/sleep. All right. Lots of information. Again, I feel like I just bombard you guys sometimes, but I just have so many tips and tricks and things that I've researched over the years. And this is one of my favorite topics, as mentioned. So hopefully you can take 1 or 2 things and apply them, and maybe try, something else next month and see how it goes. So what is one thing you could try this week? I want you to just think about that. Out of everything we've talked about, what's one thing you could do to optimize your sleep a little more? And I just want to thank you again for listening, for being here, for prioritizing yourself. And then if you found this helpful, please share with someone in your life who would get value from it. It means the world to us, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
That's our episode for today, but let's not make it the end of our love story. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and think of some women in your life you'd love to share it with. And if you want to learn more about our events and programs, visit wayofthemuse.com. See you next time.